Okay, and we're live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Keystroke Medium. On today's show, we are joined by best-selling author and newly named marketing director of Draft to Digital, Kevin Tumlinson.
Hey there.
Kevin,
Sorry,
welcome
I
to the
did not mean
show.
to
No,
interrupt.
no, you're good. This is what we do. We do impromptu, and we don't run off a script at
All
all.
right.
We
Excellent.
must interrupt. It's a moral imperative. So,
Excellent. All right.
Just as a little introduction, Kevin, before we get started, your catalog's pretty extensive. You've got novellas, sci-fi novels, your contemporary thriller series, I'm going to pronounce Quelo Medallion.
There you go. You got it.
Got it. According to Amazon, you have 27 books published and some non-fiction titles. 30-Day Author is the latest one, it looks like, that you've put out.
Right.
So we're excited to have you on the show. And would you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in writing?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
how I got started in writing, that's a long story. I mean, the joke everyone's heard by now is that I wrote my first book when I was 5 years old. And it's not entirely a fabrication. I actually did write something. I wrote 5 pages on Big Chief notebook paper with one of those big fat
Oh, yeah.
pencils, And so I did good work, and that was kind of the start for me, I guess. Once I made the mental connection between words on the page and the stories that I was being told, I wanted to be the one telling them. So I spent the next several years, writing short stories and dictating stories at least into the tape recorder, a tape recorder I was given. It was my favorite Christmas gift of all time. And then once I got sort of into high school, I started writing professionally. I actually started at 12 years old. I started writing for our local paper, and that led to a lot of opportunities. And it wasn't like I made a ton of money, but I did get paid. So it's a pro gig once you get paid, right?
oh, yeah.
Right.
So I mean, after that,
The paper route, right?
exactly. Yeah, I mean, chumps. I was writing the stuff that those guys were hurling.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, once I kind of got into once I got to that notion that you could actually make money by putting words on the page, it was game set match for me. I was all in, and I started writing short stories, which periodically would be published, usually for free. I usually didn't get much money for short stories, but I did start to get a little bit of attention. I mean, people started to kind of recognize that this was something I could do, and something that I actually excelled at. And once I got into media, because there's this delusion that took hold that if you're going to make a living, you can't make a living as a fiction writer. That's what I believed at the time. So.
Right.
I made the mistake. Well, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of glad I went the route I did, because honestly, getting into media meant learning how to deal with deadline pressure, learning how to perform on demand rather than waiting for the muse. There were a lot of advantages that came out of that. So, and a lot of connections and a lot of contacts that I still use today. So, I can't regret the way I came in, but I spent a lot of years sort of denying the fiction side of my work in favor of I got to make a living.
Right.
Never quite connecting the idea that I might be able to do both at the same time. So,
Right.
so I was blessed to come to that. I published my first book in 2008. I had a traditional contract and ended up pulling out, and went indie at that point when it was still brand new, really. I mean, it had been around forever, but the indie publishing industry as we know it was really just kind of gearing up in 2008.
Yeah.
And at some point during this interview, I'd like to hear about what kind of that whole decision where you decided to, because that's pretty early and a bold decision at the time. We may have to circle around back to that.
I can give it to you in short real quick if you want it, because I can do basic math. Once I figured out that it was going to start costing me out of pocket to be traditionally published, I mean, I got an advance, but it was never going to cover everything I had to pay for out of pocket.
Right.
What types of things at that point? You're talking 2008 or so.
Yeah.
What type of things would you have to pay for?
Well, all the marketing essentially was coming out of my advance. I mean,
Right.
they were doing very little marketing. There was a requirement in my contract for me to do appearances and do signings, and I was paying out of pocket to go to those.
Right.
There was a slight, we'll say, I forget the term. The term has slipped my brain, but there was like a stipend you can get, and it wasn't really much.
Right.
But it was also working against my royalties. So anytime I got paid anything above and beyond the advance that I'd received, it was working against me. So it was very easy to come to the decision that this wasn't going to work out for me the way I wanted it to.
Right.
So I paid back the advance, and I had already spent some of the advance because that's what you do when you're in your 20s and you get a big chunk of money.
Oh yeah.
Is you go off and buy a motorcycle and you can buy a bunch of other cool stuff. So I had to kind of dip into my savings to pay back my my advance.
I think it's awesome you had savings at 20.
Yeah, well, it was through no fault of my own. I mean, my grandparents had set something up for me,
Yeah.
and that's all gone now.
Yeah.
So how hard was it getting into indie publishing in 2008? I mean, it's fairly easy now. 8 years later, 2016. There's, obviously there's Draft to Digital that we'll talk about later, and KDP and all the easy ways just to get into it. But
Right.
in 2008, they didn't have any of those services. How difficult was it to get in? And
yeah, they had a version of KDP and CreateSpace at that point. I don't recall whether they were called the same thing or not, but you could publish to Kindle. That was relatively easy. It's very much like it is today, but that wasn't the end of the story. Obviously,
Right.
You had to get past. To me at that point, most people were publishing on those platforms because it was a means to just get a book out there, and I was no different. Like,
Right.
It didn't matter whether it was a bestseller at that point. Getting the book out there, making it exist, was more important. So, in that sense, it really was no different than it is now. Now we just have far more resources and options at our fingertips. I mean, just a ridiculous number of things that we can offer or that we can use.
I remember Lulu was one. I tried that for paperbacks probably 2006.
Yeah.
And it was I thought it was a blast, but it was nothing like as smooth. And there was a very active board, or kind of like a K-boards type thing, where people would get on there and chat, and that was pretty fun.
Yeah, Lulu was one of the options I weighed, and was a hair away from going with those guys when I discovered CreateSpace.
Right.
And to be completely honest about the whole thing, CreateSpace got me because there was practically zero overhead. At that point, you had to pay $35 to get into expanded distribution, and you had to buy your proof copy. They didn't have digital proofs at that time. I still, of course, buy a printed proof, but anytime you made a change to the book, you had to buy another physical copy.
And then wait 2 weeks while you got it.
And wait 2 weeks, wanting to stab everyone while this thing slowly crawls across the nation.
Put up memes of the cranky writer waiting for his book.
Exactly. So I started using CreateSpace mostly because after comparing it to Lulu and I think even like Ingram Spark or whatever their early iteration was, I'm like, well, it's practically free. I'd be nuts to pay anyone else.
And easier to get to Amazon, because I remember I didn't even understand that process at all. When you use some of those other platforms like Lulu or maybe even Lightning Source, you had to do a lot more work to get your paperbacks sold on Amazon. Now, CreateSpace, publish on CreateSpace, you can buy it on Amazon.
Right. And I was pretty lucky in that I realized right away what a player Amazon was going to be in the industry.
Right.
I was a fairly naive guy at the time when it came to my work, and I had the same dream everyone really ends up having. I wanted to see my book in Barnes and Noble. Right. I had this vision of going to Barnes & Noble and signing every copy of my book, because, of course they're going to have a few hundred on hand. And,
with boxes in the back room just waiting to be unpacked.
Right at the front, when you come in the front door too, on that display right
Yeah,
there too.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah. But I mean, I don't know if maybe I was lucky or maybe a little smarter than I give myself credit for, but I picked up right away that Amazon was going to be a major player in
Oh
that
yeah.
industry. And
Yeah.
so I was thrilled to be able to get my books on Amazon. That's how I was buying books, you know.
Right.
I mean, I still bought books at Barnes and Noble, but I mean, even at that point, I'd call it maybe 60% of what I was buying was coming from Amazon. And the idea of ebooks was still pretty new at that point, and I was excited about it. And I started reading ebooks, and it was a lot clunkier back then because I didn't have a Kindle for quite a while. I had to read it in like a web app or something, and it wasn't a great experience. And so I wasn't entirely sure that was ever going to take off.
Yeah.
But then having the ability to have my book in print was phenomenal. So it was, there were trade-offs, but luckily I got into it when I did. I mean, I didn't get into it in the gold rush sense, unfortunately, where I may have cashed out with a few million right away. I wasn't savvy enough, I think, at that point.
It'd be nice to have started indie publishing at the exact right time with the exact right
Right.
number of long backlists that you could republish, that you just got the rights back from whatever publisher,
Yeah.
and you have like 15 books to put up there. That would have been great.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Well, you talk about backlists, but you have 27 books out there right now on Amazon.
Yeah.
Well, at least that's what I counted.
Well, I actually have like 30 plus books out right now.
Oh, okay.
And Amazon kind of, I don't know. I don't understand what's happening with some of the things that are supposed to be showing up there. I'm still working on that. But
I gotcha.
I had a whole incident on Friday, guys. If you had talked to me on
Uh-oh.
Friday, this would have been a whole different conversation.
Would we have got angry, Kevin?
You would have gotten very angry, Kevin, because I updated. So what I do that a lot of people do, and I recommend this, when I get updates from readers, like someone says, "Hey, I spotted a typo in chapter 11."
Right.
When I get enough of those, I keep a little list, and when I've got a certain number, I go in and make all those tweaks, and then I re-upload the book. Because I've paid a lot of money to have those books edited, and I still have tons of typos in them, and it just drives me nuts. But
Right.
thankfully, readers are very forgiving about that kind of stuff. So, and helpful. But I uploaded that book, and then I got an email from Amazon saying there was a copyright dispute on that book. This is my first book, since 2008, and I had to go to war over that. And they took it offline for 48 hours. They blocked it.
Wow.
And I mean, they're like, well, it's a third-party dispute, and we're hands-off about that kind of thing. It's up to you and the third party to resolve it, but we're not going to tell you who the third party is. You're just sort of on your own.
Get out.
So, I
How are
immediately
you supposed to fix it?
I'll tell you what I did. Wrote them a crap ton of emails, progressively angrier emails, and never heard a word back from them. Still haven't.
Wow.
But I also went immediately. This is the first time I've done this. I don't ever really tell people that they need to do this, but in this case, I went ahead and registered the copyright on that book. It cost me about $160, and I did it. I paid an additional like $35 to have it done overnight, and so now I have, that's my first official registered copyright.
There you go.
I wouldn't have even bothered, except that if there's any contest, I want to win that contest hands down.
Right.
Right. Especially if it's become an issue, something like that. So.
Well, there's these book farms, generally in China, where they will actually steal your free book. I've had this happen to me. Okay, like they took First Colony and they put it on Amazon under their own name. They took the very low res, crappy thumbnail version of the cover and blew it up big and put banners at the top and bottom with some other author's name. But my name was still on the cover of the book. The copyright inside the book still said Kevin Tumlinson. Everything still said me.
Right.
But there was a very nice high-res banner on top of a very crappy low-res cover. And I suspect that's how this happened. I think that they had it on record that somebody was claiming copyright.
You think that should be an easy fix? It's got Kevin Tumlinson on the cover. Maybe
Yeah.
Maybe it's his
maybe we
book.
should
I'm
look
thinking
into
of
that.
Wild Stab in the Dark.
I mean, they didn't bother to remove my name. So
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, it's crazy. I remember it was about a year ago. I first found a site where one of those pirate sites, and it had all my books on there for free. And people
Yeah.
always talk about don't worry so much about people that are just pirating individual copies and things because people are going to do it if you have anything out there. And that was kind of shocking at first, kind of
Yeah.
splashed cold water in the face. And then I realized that pretty much everybody's books are there.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I
and
don't. I kind of subscribe to the Cory Doctorow sort of philosophy of piracy for books. I mean, he offers every book he publishes is available for free on his website.
right,
He will encourage people to take them and put them on BitTorrent, because
right,
it's the people who are downloading that book for free typically aren't going to pay for the book
yeah,
anyway. So you're not losing anything, but what they do is go off and say, oh man, I read the latest
yeah.
Kevin Tumlinson book and it was awesome, and some of their friends will have more scruples than they do and they're going to buy the book. So the problem for me isn't that they're sharing the work out there freely, it's that some people are trying to profit off of it by
Right.
putting their name on the cover and
Right.
republishing it. So that's a little bit different.
And then causing Amazon to block your legitimate book for 48
Yes,
hours.
a
We lost two
stab-worthy
Amazons.
offense if I've ever heard of one. Because
Yeah.
I was fully prepared to board a plane to China and find whoever this guy was.
Tumlinson invades China. Film at 11.
Well, let's talk about your books. You've got the Quelo Medallion, the Quaalude
Quelo Medallion.
Medallion, and that is the Dan Kotler series.
Yeah.
And you've got that novel and then a prequel out.
Yeah.
You originally started writing science fiction, and you've got several science fiction up there, but you like to call yourself a spec fic author. So let's talk about the Dan Cutler series for a minute. Can you talk to us about the kind of the development of the idea and how you went through character and plot?
Yeah, you're gonna love this actually, because I have been a science fiction and fantasy author, mostly science fiction, my entire career, and I've done all right with it. I partnered with Nick Thacker a couple of years ago now. We do a podcast together, but we also have co-written a few books together. And he says to me one day, he says, I make my money on thrillers. I really think you would do great with thrillers, and he essentially dared me to write one. So
Nice.
So I said, okay, fine. Now at the time we had just purchased our first RV, which was actually just a camper trailer, and we were taking a long trip. And so I had started it. We took a trip for our anniversary, and so I had started it before that, and then I had to put it aside. And so I was kind of, I had to fight to get back to it because it wasn't my story. It wasn't what I was used to telling.
Right.
And I eventually came back to it after we got back, and
I think you could have written during your anniversary trip. I think
I really tried. I did one day, and you'd be surprised. So we went to Disney World, right? Because that's where we went for our honeymoon.
Mhm.
And I really, honestly tried. I took everything with me, but
Yeah,
I only
just in
managed to
case.
do it one morning.
Right.
Because it's Disney World. Like
Right.
everybody's going to get up early and go do. So it didn't matter how early I got up either.
Right.
So
So you
anyway,
said you're getting back to your thriller after your trip is where I
Yeah.
grew up.
we come back. I finished it up within once I started working on it, I got really excited about it again, and I finished it within a week or two. And
Cool.
I did something a little different. Like I put it on pre-order because, frankly, I just didn't know if anyone on my mailing list was going to care about this book because everyone came in on science fiction.
Right.
And I had taken forever to build this list. I went from like 60 people, for a good solid 3 or 4 or 5 years to about 20,000 people over the span of like 2 years. And it was a lot of work. and so I get this list and I'm like, they're all here because of my science fiction. So what do I do? What I decided to do was I created a pre-order. I announced it and told everyone, if you're interested, you can go check it out. And this is just something I wrote on a dare, and I told the whole story. And that was the biggest pre-order I have ever had. Like within a month, I had quadrupled the results of my previous pre-order.
Very
Just blew
nice.
it out of the way. And that was with the cover. That was with the description of it as a thriller, and the backstory of it being a dare. And when when the pre-order came due, and that was May 31st, we were actually on the road for another trip. This time in Colorado, going up and around and coming back through Colorado in our new RV, which is a full-on motor coach.
Sweet.
And I had it set to go live, and it went live, and boom! I mean, it became the best-selling book of my career, and it just has been explosive.
That's awesome.
So that changed the game for me. I mean, suddenly I'm like, there's some merit in being a thriller author, apparently.
Thriller's good. Make a note. Thriller,
Yeah.
good genre.
I'll tell you, I run recently. I'm using InstaFreebie to kind of test a few things, and
Yeah.
and it's a great tool. But I ran Citadel First Colony, and I ran Coelho Medallion. They're posting on Twitter and Facebook the exact same number of times to the same audience, and by far Coelho Medallion has outstripped the other book. So there could be a number of factors in that, but I just have this sneaky suspicion that my readership really enjoys the thrillers. So
That's cool.
Well,
So-
that they say that if you're marketing to one audience, say in that genre. I wanted to touch on this question too. They say write in one genre because people are going to want to read that genre or whatever. But I read several genres, and I think every reader does. So I don't think that if you start, because I mean you've obviously written several genres. Like there's another author we've had on the show, Ernie Lindsay. He writes in several genres, and so I don't think pigeonholing yourself into one genre is actually necessary for your career, and I don't think you should. I think you should try to branch out and write different things.
So we'll really dig in on this concept when we start talking about Draft to Digital a little bit later. But here's how I feel about it. If you've got it in you to just write one type of book, then by all means do that. There's absolutely no harm in it. Here's why they tell you to write in one genre. It's the easiest way to build a platform and build momentum, because most of the time people will want to pigeonhole you as one type of author.
Right.
J.K. Rowling has written Casual Vacancy and everything, but people don't care about that book as much as they do Harry Potter, because she writes a fantasy genre in a fantasy genre.
Right.
So, the book is excellent, but it's been really difficult to get it to take off. And the same problem applies. Stephen King even has that sort of conflict. And when you get a book from Stephen King, you expect it to have some kind of supernatural twist, but he's got plenty of books. He's fantasy series and that sort of thing. And now he's famous enough that just his name is the brand, which is great, but it took time to get there. So the lesson to learn from that is you will progress faster by focusing on one thing, but that doesn't necessarily make it the right path for you. If you're someone who can write well in a variety of genres and you're okay with taking the slower, steeper route, then do that. There's absolutely no reason not to. I mean, over time, you may discover pockets of audiences rather than just one solid audience, and they'll all come to you through different books.
It's like I just had this analogy pop into my head for so check this out. So as a writer writing in one genre or a writer writing in multiple genres, you can kind of get what I call I just pinned this, the Hamill-Freeman effect, where you get like Mark Hamill, who did Star Wars and then has done sci-fi his whole life, and now he's the sci-fi guy. He is Luke Skywalker. But Morgan Freeman has been in sci-fi movies, fantasy movies, historical movies, like all kinds of movies.
Everything.
And look which one's doing better.
See,
I mean, I like Mark Hamill, but
I'd say that is the sort of nugget to pull out of that is Mark Hamill played Luke Skywalker, but Morgan Freeman played Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
True.
If
Right.
you look,
Mark Hamill get really involved in doing voice
he's done
acting.
and that was great because no one saw his face, so
Right.
they couldn't be jarred by the fact that Luke Skywalker is the Joker.
Exactly.
You know? But you see the same thing, by the way, with Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is playing Tom Cruise on screen.
Right. Absolutely.
And the actors who are capable of doing that, it's an interesting sort of twist because we always think of actors being able to just disappear into a role. But these guys actually do it in reverse. The role disappears into them. And the same thing applies to certain authors like Stephen King, who can write anything. I mean, the dude could write a cookbook, and it's going to be the best-selling freaking cookbook on the planet.
That's true. It's very true.
So,
I'll be scared to eat anything out of Stephen King cookbook. I'm just saying.
I would probably.
I had a quick question before I forget. I made a note actually. This goes right to what we're talking about. So if you're writing in multiple genres, now as far as for a marketing perspective, do you have one list, or do you have a list for science fiction or fantasy or what?
I have segmented my list as far as nonfiction versus fiction.
Right.
And part of me really wanted to segment for the different genres. And I have the capability of doing it now. I didn't for the longest time. But what I've discovered is I'm building the kind of platform that we've been talking about. People are coming in now on my name rather than what I'm writing. And I like that. That's what I wanted from the beginning because I don't want to be pigeonholed as one type of writer.
Right.
I always referred to myself as a speculative fiction writer because that seemed like the broadest category I could be in.
Right.
And I still think that it is, but I'm actually quite honored now if people want to refer to me as a thriller author because I at this point feel that I'd say roughly 90% of my work falls under the thriller category, even though it might be a subgenre.
Right.
So I'm perfectly happy with that. Now I still tell people I'm a spec fiction author a lot of times, and if they understand what that means at all, it's fine. But thriller author doesn't need any explanation, so I'm kind of
speculative fiction is a term probably more other writers are going to be familiar with.
I mean, I was familiar with it because of Orson Scott Card.
Oh yeah.
And because that's how he referred to himself, and I think he had the same conundrum because everyone looked at him as a science fiction author because of Ender's Game.
Yep.
Right.
But then he has, historic fiction. He's got fantasy, sort of a rustic, rural, not rural, but I forget the genre he termed, but it's a fantasy series about,
I know which one you're talking about. It's almost
the Alvin Maker.
Yeah, that's it. The Alvin Maker. Yeah.
And a lot of his work is like that, and he was one of the big influences on my career. So I wanted to emulate him. So he was using speculative fiction as a title, and I felt like that was a nice broad title that I could adopt. And I still claim it. I think thriller author needs no explanation to the reader, so that's actually probably a better way to refer to myself.
Yeah, those are like, what is speculative fiction? I don't understand what that is.
Speculates what I want to write, and then I writes it.
Yeah. So tell us about the Dan Cutler real quick, because we kind of skipped that part.
We blew past that. So
let's talk about that, and then we'll get into Draft to Digital.
Okay. So Dan Cutler, he is I wanted to create a character who is very much larger than life, but still grounded. So Dan Cutler is one of these guys that you literally only encounter in fiction. I mean, he's a multiple PhD. He has PhDs in quantum physics, but he also has PhDs in archaeology. He has a great love for academia, but they don't always have a great love for him. And so what I tell people now, I've just this morning, just before this interview, put the final period on the second book in that series.
Oh, fantastic.
Called The Atlantis Riddle. And thank you. And it'll go into editing as of this afternoon. But the thing that has come out of writing 2.5 books, we'll say, because I wrote the prequel, is that I now know what this guy's sort of hook is. He works with misplaced history. So the 3 stories that involve him right now involve historic finds and discoveries that are out of place. Maybe out of place history is a better way to
Okay.
describe it. He works with out of place history. I mean, the prequel, he discovers a Celtic tomb in Egypt. In the Coelho Medallion, he discovers a Viking village in like centralized America.
Nice.
In Pueblo, Colorado, actually, of all places. And
Yeah.
so, and in Atlantis Riddle, there's a whole twist there that I don't want to get into just yet, but we'll just say it's along the same lines. So that's Kotler in a nutshell. He has a partner of sorts. It's evolved into a partnership. An FBI agent named Roland Denzel, who is not named for my good friend and fellow author Roland Denzel. It was actually a coincidence before he and I really connected. But I tell him that's his namesake all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So it's evolving into a really interesting series, and now we've got a scenario where the FBI and Dan Kotler have a somewhat formal partnership now on these types of out-of-place history cases. So we're going to start seeing a lot more, happening as this series evolves. I'm very excited about it because it's the kind of series that every volume can stand alone. That's my goal.
Right.
But I still like to work in pieces. I'm well known at this point for Easter eggs. Every book that I've ever written is connected to every other book in some small way, and it's easy when you're doing a series. I can just, it's all part of the same universe.
Right.
But I'm really excited about these because I can write standalone stories, but I still have these little pieces. The personal relationships that form in the other books don't just disappear with each new volume. He's still dealing with baggage from the previous book, and he's still dealing with the fallout from all of it. Even though it doesn't get a major role in the story, it's still there. So, very exciting stuff.
What would you? I mean, you said in our pre-show interview, you said it was your Jack Reacher, but how would you? What series or book series would you compare it to, just to give readers a little connection?
I think I've been reading the Sigma Force novel. Gosh, his name. I'm looking over there because the book is sitting over on my nightstand.
Mm-hmm.
Not Rollins. Not Lee Child. Gosh.
James Rollins.
James Rollins.
Yeah, James.
Yes.
Rollins.
Okay. Thank you. Gosh, I feel bad now because I've been touting that. So I've been reading some of those books, and I think that those are in a lot of ways very similar. So if you consider the way I described it to you was that it was Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code meets Jack Reacher,
Right.
And although Kotler is not he doesn't go around kicking butt all the time necessarily. He's not really that type of hero. He's an academic above all else. But the Sigma Force stories are interesting to me because they involve science and they involve people who are well trained and very intelligent, going off and solving some of the world's problems without the world ever knowing about it. And that's kind of the way these books work.
Nice.
Oh, the quiet professional type of mentality. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, let's move into a little bit of a different direction and talk about Draft to Digital. You just got named or hired or however you want to call it as their marketing director.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and what Draft to Digital is all about?
Yeah. So I've been a fan of Draft to Digital for years now. Long before we ever talked about me working with them, I've pushed them. If you listen to any of my podcasts and anything I've appeared on, I frequently brought those guys up as kind of my favorite publishing outlet. And if you're not familiar with Draft to Digital, what they do is that, among other things, primarily what they do is they'll take your work, they can convert your manuscript into an ebook, and then they can place that book with their vendors, including Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks. We have a long and growing list of vendors worldwide. So much like we have a competitor, Smashwords, which does essentially the same thing. We kind of think of ourselves as vetting our vendors a little better, vetting the work actually a little better. There's less scam garbage, popping up in our catalog.
Right.
So
Like buying a pamphlet for $5.99.
exactly, yeah. We won't allow that kind of stuff through. We're very diligent about that. So, and that gives us a great relationship with our vendors. So,
Well,
um, go ahead.
I used both. Started out with Smashwords for
Yeah.
my broader distribution, and went to Draft to Digital. And Draft to Digital is one of those where when you use it, you're like, why did I not do this sooner?
Right, and
It's
the
so
big
much easier and smoother and just nicer.
yeah, and the big drawback that people like to point out is that Draft to Digital has fewer vendors in its catalog, and I've been fortunate to discover why that is because we're actually we're very picky. Like
Right.
we want to do business with vendors who understand the concept of what we're trying to do because what's interesting about the company is that they actually were founded. There were two founders, one of whom is a self-published author, and that's Aaron Pogue. And they built he originally used Smashwords and wasn't really satisfied with his experience there. And I completely relate to this. Like he and I were on the exact same page. I used Smashwords and was so disenchanted with the whole experience that I really didn't keep it up. Like I left it to just rot, basically.
Yeah,
It's harder. It's just not.
It is harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And they did a great. They've done and probably will continue to do a lot for the indie community and stuff. I don't want to put them down.
no,
Good
and that's the thing. I tell people all the time. First of all, we owe them a kind of debt of gratitude because they opened up this particular aspect of the industry, which is the sort of all-in-one. I can publish to as many places as you allow me. I think that's great. I mean, I think they did a fantastic job. Coker, built something remarkable, and we owe some gratitude to that. We really just took that concept and ran with it and made it our own, and approached it in a slightly different way because we are focused almost entirely on the author themselves. Creating these tools that allow the author to be successful, and we literally don't succeed at all unless we make that author successful. So we have a vested interest in that. Well, so these things, by the way, were the things that I noticed as an author in the service. So I had interviewed Dan Wood on my podcast, the Wordslinger podcast,
Right.
and so he and I hit it off, and we met in person at the Smarter Artists Summit in April, I guess, of this year, 2016.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and we hit it off there, had some drinks, and we've been in contact numerous times since then. And I just hit him up one day and said, hey, I own a business. I do some marketing work and creative work for companies. If you guys ever need anybody, let me know. And that led to this sort of collaboration on something they were about to release called Universal Book Links, which we can talk about. But I ended up in this conversation with Aaron Pogue, and I'd given him a proposal, and they really were impressed by the proposal. But he says to me, "Well, we're not going to do this. We're not going to run with the proposal as is." I was a little disappointed, and I said, "I understand, man. Well, maybe we'll work together." He's like, "Well, we just figured it would be cheaper and better if we just hired you outright." And so, so they made me an offer, and I wasn't particularly looking for full-time work, honestly. I mean, I wanted a nice, steady relationship with those guys because I believed in what they were doing.
Right.
And my wife and I were about to get on the road full time, and I thought, I'm going to have some free time. Like I can't work on my books exclusively all the time. I mean, I need something to kind of keep my brain active. And I
break up the monotony.
Right, and I'm a big fan of helping the author community. So this just worked out perfect, and I've been working for them for a couple of months now. We're doing a lot of marketing push, and the Universal Book Links, that was my first launch with those guys, and it went phenomenal.
They seem to have a lot of opportunities to help authors that aren't just that are native to the website, like on Amazon. If you publish on Amazon, they have a frequently asked questions, and they've got a forum that you can go look on, but there's not really any direct link to help.
Right.
And that's what I like about Draft to Digital. And I've got one of my books on Draft to Digital right now, and another one on KDP. but the thing I like about Drafted Digital is you can go into their author resources page, and you've got editing services there and
Right.
book cover services there,
Right.
and now you've got the universal book links, and it takes you straight to that website. I mean, it's not trying to go through a forum trying to figure out where to go.
Right.
This has it right there on the page.
I actually am. That's one of the things that I'm actively interested in, kind of retooling a bit so that we can go even further with it, because we're adding new features, but we also are connecting with a lot of author resources that we endorse, and they don't show up on that page unless we endorse them. So we've got a nice little screening process in place, and we're looking to we're always looking to improve that and add more great resources, and then eventually.
What type of resources are we talking about?
Well, like you have access to editors, you have access to people who do your formatting for you if you need it. You've got marketing tools available on that site. And there are some. And here's what's been great. Because of my background in the podcasting world, I'm connected to all these really amazing people who provide services for authors. So I'm going to start bringing some of those guys in, so and they're already pre-vetted, so it's even easier. But I want to make that entire page the sort of one-stop shop for people who need those resources, because that's ultimately that's a big part of the Drafted Digital sort of goal, I guess. The mission is to help authors. I mean, to help authors become successful. That's the simplest way to boil down what we do there.
Right.
So talk about universal book links.
Yes. Okay. Here's what it all boils down to. One of the biggest pain points for authors is if you're trying to promote your work out there, most of the time it's just easier to point everybody to Amazon. Absolutely. Because it's the biggest online retailer for books. It's just simpler for you to say, visit my author page on Amazon, buy my book on Amazon. Right. It just boils down to being easier. But that's a problem, because Amazon ends up holding all the eggs. And they have a really bad history of being a fox.
And actually, right before we get into the UBLs, just to give everybody kind of a point of reference, we're talking about Amazon and then going wide, and Drafted Digital allows you to go wide to all the places in one spot. Right. So Apple iBooks and Barnes & Noble and Kobo and all that stuff, you can upload to one site, and it goes to all these other retailers.
Digital ebook realtors.
I wasn't going to correct you.
No.
I was just going to let it roll.
You stopped me right there, and you tell. So that's what Drafted Digital does, is they allow you to go to a one-stop shop to publish your book. But before the UBLs, you still had to individually link your ads to a certain place, and that's very cumbersome when you're talking about sending mailing lists and emails for specifically for iBooks or for Kobo or whatever.
Right.
You got like 30 books you're going to do. That could be a lot. 30 books times.
That's a lot of
times all the different storefronts.
Right. Exactly.
That was always the challenge for me, and so I know that it's a challenge for other authors, because if I want to promote my work, well, here's the simple fact: Amazon, as ubiquitous as it tends to be, is not in every country in the world. Right. And so there are emerging markets out there where you can't buy a Kindle book, but there are millions upon millions of English-speaking readers who might actually love your work. So that's one challenge that, if you're locked into promoting only Amazon, you're leaving money on the table essentially. We don't shy away from it, because I understand 100% why this is a reality. But Amazon has their fund, and the name of it has completely. It's the KDP fund that makes you exclusive. Okay. Right. Yeah. You get into Kindle Select, and you put your book out there, and then Kindle Unlimited subscribers can read your book, and you get paid by page reads. Okay, that's amazing, because what it does is it allows you to monetize an otherwise freebie audience. Okay. Right. So yeah, that's pretty cool, and it does help a lot of authors build a career very quickly. It's one of the faster ways to actually become financially solvent as an author, as
Right.
to focus on this. So the advice that I and a lot of other professionals give is going to feel pretty counterintuitive, but we're telling people you really need to start thinking about going wide, meaning getting away from Amazon exclusivity and building your platform on a more global scale, because
Right.
you can easily corner yourself and make yourself subject to the whims of Amazon if you don't do it this way, if you don't
Yeah. What
look
happens if the
outward,
rules change? Or
which they will.
yeah.
Which they have and
They
they will,
have.
exactly.
They have, and there are several examples. The most recent that I can think of, Amazon used to ignore a specific rule about using affiliate links in email, and a lot of businesses popped up around promoting ebooks to a large list of subscribers and making their money exclusively on these affiliate links.
Right.
Then when it was no longer strategically advantageous for Amazon to turn their head and ignore that rule, they pulled the plug on it, and they get to keep all the readers, but you don't get to have any of the money. And
Right. Yeah.
so you saw a few hundred of these small businesses disappear, with the click of a mouse.
Right. I
So,
hope you didn't quit your day job to do that.
and then here's the thing, though. Some people were making enough money that not only did they quit their day job, they gave them the finger and burned the place down on the way out, because I'm making 6 figures a month by promoting it to a list. Why do I need you? And now that's gone.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that will happen. Now, I don't like to play on fear in all this, but it scares me to death to think that Amazon holds the reins to my career.
Right.
Because Amazon has a track record of not caring about me.
If you're a business person or a business author, I can never say it, authorpreneur.
Entrepreneur,
right?
Yeah.
There's a difference between being fearful, and just being a smart business person.
Yeah.
If you were a real estate investor, then you wouldn't put all your money just in one tiny market. You
wouldn't.
Diversify.
You diversify, and that's exactly where I was going to go with that. And a lot of authors will take that. Entrepreneurs in particular will diversify by creating additional products besides their books, which also works. Except that if you're using Amazon as your platform to sell these ancillary products and services, then you're still not diversified. You're still lacking diversification. And so the only way to really counter this is to start branching out and building your platform on a more global scale and being strategic about how you do it. And the great thing about Draft to Digital is that we are going out and vetting global markets in a global marketplace so that authors can get out there and do this with an easy button of sorts. Because if you got to go and find every single ebook retailer on the planet and go and get into their system, now you're stuck with a couple of problems. One, there are hundreds of these, hundreds. You're now going to have to keep track of all your sales on all these different platforms. You're going to have to keep track of all their rules about what your cover can look like, with sizes and that sort of thing, what your content can actually be, because some markets restrict, if you're writing erotica, you can't sell on. I believe there are quite a few stores. I'm not going to name any because I don't want to be wrong first, but I also don't want to put anyone on the spot. But there are a few stores that won't accept certain types of erotica.
Scott, you're out. You can't write anymore.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
You're done, Scott.
Well, in that's such a loose definition. What's erotica? What's an erotica book cover?
Which is all in the eye of the beholder, and you're never going to be able to figure it out. Okay, so the safer bet is to go out and find as many markets that will allow it as possible. And Draft to Digital, one of the things they do is if you upload that erotica manuscript, for example, and they start pushing it out, they know that Scribd won't take it, or whoever, right? So you can exclude that market for that book, and you can do it on a book-by-book basis, so that if you have other books in your catalog, you're not banned from doing business with these guys. You just can't sell this one Bigfoot erotica tale.
Right.
Well, because if you do a Facebook ad and you put the wrong stuff on there, you can lose your account.
That's right.
And so this would be a little bit safer. Is you can still sell one book,
Right.
but
Right. Now, I want to get back to the universal book links because it solves a problem for people. Because Draft to Digital gives you a nice, easy, simple one dashboard that you can use to monitor everything you're doing, upload your work, set your price. Everything is taken care of, right? And it's beautiful. It's the best. It literally is the best ebook dashboard I've ever seen.
I completely agree. I don't like Amazon's. I think Amazon's is very clunky, and you have to look and make sure you're doing the right things. Draft to Digital.
It's like putting on a pair of sunglasses that have 2 nails in the lenses.
Exactly. My eyes are so scratchy.
So universal book links, the short version of this is that it allows you to copy the URL from any of your book product pages on any site, which can be Amazon or anywhere else. Copy the link to your book from Amazon, as an example, drop it into the box on books2read.com. That's books2read.com. Hit the button, and it'll generate a URL. And here's what it's doing, and you watch this. I was about to say it's in the background, but you actually watch this happen. It finds your book on every single ebook retailer on the internet and attaches that to this one solitary URL. So that when a reader clicks on that URL, or UBL we like to call it, they get a page that says, this book is available on these storefronts. There's a nice list of thumbnails with all the different ebook readers. And then you can select the storefront you like as a reader. You can select the storefront you prefer. And, let's say that I'm Canadian, so I want to buy it on Kobo. And it'll ask if I want to make Kobo my default store. So that every single time I click on a UBL from any author, it'll take me directly to that book's product page on my preferred storefront.
That's very cool.
That is freaking huge, right? It means that I can create one. And by the way, if you register, and it's free, all this is free. If you register, you get a dashboard where you can keep track of all your UBLs, and you can assign the affiliate links so that you can make affiliate dollars off these. But you can also create unique URLs for your book. Like I have books2read.com/Quelo medallion. And anyone who types that gets a selection of where it's going to be. Then click on wherever it's going to be, and then buy it on any storefront. So
that's very nice.
I only have to put that link on all my materials now, right? So in the past, if I wanted to do something like this, I had to generate a link for every store it's on.
Oh yeah.
And then I had to keep track of all that. And if a store stopped selling it, or something went wrong, or this store closed down, now I have broken links floating around. If I give that link to give that list of links to, say, a book reviewer, I've got a broken link now, or something always goes wrong.
So the UBLs work with Amazon too. It's not just straight for Draft to Digital.
They work for. You don't even have to be a Draft to Digital subscriber to use this. Anyone can use it. It's absolutely free. You can register to use the additional services, but that's there's no charge. There's nothing to worry about there. But it goes and finds it on Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, a million other stores out there. And if you don't find it, you can copy and paste the URL directly into it and add it yourself. So you're never without. You can build it as big as you want. It's amazing because it gives you one link that never changes. So if I put it on a bunch of print materials, I get, I'm planning to create these these magnet signs that go on my RV with my various books.
Yeah. Right.
And it's going to look like crap, but it's going to get attention, right? Everyone else is going to have. They're all going to have a UBL with a specific mention of that book's title, and I've already built them all. And so anyone looking at it, and I'll build these into QR codes and barcodes. I'll do I'll do everything I need to do to make it easy for the reader. But they'll be able to go and find that book and go click on that link and find it anywhere that they prefer to read it. And I don't ever have to worry about that signage going out of date. It'll always be up to date.
Now you said you. Go ahead.
I pulled the sign up there. It looks nice. So.
I'm going to add the one final awesome thing about UBLs. You can go back, and as new storefronts become available, you can rescan with one click, and it'll add all those new storefronts to your UBL. So that link is always, always, always up to date.
That's very cool.
Yeah, that's neat. I like that a lot. I'm excited. I'll have to play with that when we get done with our.
Oh, it's very cool. I mean, I'm telling you, man. Before I ever started with these guys, they told me about this thing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't allowed to share it with anybody, and it drove me freaking crazy. But I was already loading up books, man. And think about it in terms of this: when you do an also buy page in your book, all those URLs lead to every storefront now. So you only have to create, and Draft to Digital will create that also buy for you, okay? But if you're doing it yourself, and even if you're publishing on KDP Select, you should use these. And here's the big cool reason why. If you're exclusive to Amazon, what it does is it uses globalization, and it will find the storefront that's regional to that person, so that if I'm in any country worldwide and click on your link, it'll tell me the book's available in Amazon UK or Amazon NZ or whatever, and I can make that my default storefront.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you can track the stats on the UBLs. Does that work for like a marketing expo, or you're gonna put a Facebook ad and you use the UBL? Can you track where they go and if there's sell-throughs on that?
Yeah, so you can see the storefronts they click through. You can tell where your book is. Your sales information doesn't come through because we don't have access to that. But what you do see is I'm getting more traction with readers who prefer Kobo, right?
Okay.
And so now what that does for you as a marketer is you can target your advertising and say, I want this campaign to aim specifically at Kobo readers,
right?
Because I know I get the biggest traction from Kobo readers.
Yeah.
Right.
So you get that data, and it's fairly simple data at this point. I'm sure it's going to become more complex over time, though, and it's always a good idea with this particular company, in my opinion, to get in early because as they add new stuff. In the past, we have not always been as good about letting people know some of the new features that are available to them, except immediately after release.
Right.
There are features in Draft to Digital that I did not even know existed that are very handy, and so that's one of the things I'm working on from a marketing standpoint. Is I want to make sure people know this stuff is there,
right?
Because there's so much going on in the background that you just have no idea.
Yeah. Well, if you're doing, that's my tendency is I'll get a neat tool, I'll use it for what I need it, and then I won't look at it again. So I don't really explore the whole site and all the things that are offered. So that would be probably a good idea.
Yeah, we're working on that. We just we took on a new email management system that I'm learning and tinkering with, and we're going to create sort of some autoresponder sequences to send out to new subscribers. But we're also going to have some education-based stuff. I'm doing things with the blog. We want increased thought leadership. We want to be able to. We want to be known as authorities in this industry, and as well we should, because we actually are. One of the things that's really amazing is everyone in this company. Aaron and I are both self-published authors. We understand everything about that world because we're in it.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of people working for us have backgrounds in publishing. They study the industry all day long. They're answering questions all day long. We're solving problems. And these guys, they're just. I've been a director at various software companies in the past in a marketing capacity, and I've seen launches and I've seen tech support from $100 million, $190 million companies, right?
Right.
These guys, man, on the launch day of the UBLs, I was there for that week. They're in Oklahoma City. Currently, I live in the Houston, Texas area, so I flew in. I spent a week there. That was my second week on the job, basically. I watched them launch Universal Book Links on a Tuesday, and then as people started breaking it, because that's what happens,
right?
They'd fix it within like 2 hours. I've never seen this before. Like they've got their team of guys, and they're just like, this user just said that this doesn't work. And the CEO of the freaking company says, okay, I'm looking at it now and I see what's going on. I just released the fix for it. You know,
Nice.
So, I mean, they're just constantly looking at it and fixing it and tweaking it and you know making it better. And I never see that from software companies ever. And that's what we ultimately we're a software, you know, we're a service oriented software as a service company basically. I mean that's what we are.
Yeah.
Aimed specifically at the author. But they're the most versatile company I've ever encountered. They're just incredible. We are. I should start saying we.
We.
I still stand sort of outside a little because, you know, I'm not in their office all day long, but, you know, we're a remarkable company. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on the hour,
Yeah.
and as always, they go
Yeah.
fly by when we're having a
And,
great
you know,
conversation.
You're always opening a can when you talk to me on a podcast because no matter what, and I'm what's known as a true believer because once I become sort of, you know, I fall in love with a brand or fall in love with a specific company or something, I go and find out all I can about it so that I can spread that around as much as possible, and that's exactly what happened with Draft to Digital. I've been honored to work with these guys, so yeah, I can make a podcast go over for sure.
I think if we had an 8-hour podcast, we'd still go over.
I've come damn close, man. Matt Morris's show, you know, he does 2-hour episodes or 2-hour interviews, and we'll easily go 3 hours.
Yeah, his is broken up into 20-minute segments, and they come out every day.
Yeah.
And I listened to that interview, and I think I started when like 5 or 6 were out, but I was like, I went through 1 and I went through 2, and I was like, okay, we're gonna do 3 and 4, and it'll be done. And then 5 came out, and I was like, oh my god, and then 6 came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's had me on that show 3 times now, so do the math. That's like if I put them all together, that's a good solid 10 or 12 hours on Author Strong. So.
Oh yeah. Well, Kevin, it's been a blast talking with you this morning. Do you have places where our readers or authors can track you down and find out information on you?
I'm gonna give you 3 URLs, okay?
These are not UBLs?
They're not, but one of them will lead there. Okay, first of all, if you want to know anything about me personally, go to kevintumlinson.com. That's all things Wordslinger. You can learn about my podcasts, my fiction, my nonfiction. Everything is there.
Right.
If you but the more important URLs are draft2digital.com. That's draft number 2 digital.com, where you can sign up to get your work out to as many people worldwide as possible. Check out the blog. The blog is going to start becoming a vital tool for authors, so you're going to want to know that. And then the other URL, the final URL, is books2read.com, and that is where you'll find the universal book links. But pay attention to that space because that is it's going to be a growing resource for authors and readers alike, and you're going to want to follow along as we introduce new things. Man, we introduced UBLs, and the best estimate was, 3 months from now, people are going to kind of discover it and love it, and it has just exploded. So we're going to do a whole lot more stuff just like that, so stick around.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank Kevin once again for coming on the show, and we'd love to have you back on and
anytime
later and talk about your books and see if we can get more into Dan, because we skipped over him.
We kind of
touched the bases. So, but thanks for coming on, and everybody that was watching, have a good afternoon, and we'll holler at you guys later. Kevin, if you want to hang out for just a minute,
I'll stick around.
All right.
Sounds cool. Thanks for the show.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me.